Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, everyone. It is July 6, 2020. Welcome to another Monday Morning Musings. This week, I spent most of my time working on the house, working on the yard, and I'm very satisfied with the outcome. The yard's looking great. The garden's looking great. The cannabis is growing just fine. I'm plucking different herbs from the front garden to use in my breakfast. It's amazing how much satisfaction you have gardening. And I remember as a kid, my parents would be like, hey, come weed the garden. I'm like 6, 7, 8 years old. My head deep in my video games. And I'm like, no, I'm busy. But it's just something you grow into, I guess. So many puns. Okay. Well, today I'd like to report on the aftermath of working with my neighbors and the type of journey I've had inward. We're going to go ahead and wind the clocks back to over a year ago. I was talking to one of my favorite bosses of all time. Her name is Krista. And we were discussing, the current political climate and how I would much rather have the strategy of any political party, but namely the Democrats right now, of instead of just putting out Joe Biden, announce the cabinet. Who's going to be the team going into the White House? And that would be a much more attractive offer for pretty much every American citizen to know who's going to be VP, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Interior, Chief of Staff, and fill a lot of these positions that haven't been filled. And I know a lot of my effort and time and energy has been devoted to politics on a national scale ever since the 2016 election. And slightly before that, learning more and more and more the pitfalls and the programs and the corruption that happens within our political system. And when I made this deal with my friend Krista, I was diving into this world every day and watching YouTube videos and reading articles and trying to be as well-versed as possible so I could craft the perfect tweet and respond to some dipshit asshole that is still clinging on to his God, justifying the harassment and assassination of character to the ones around him, or at least their enemies. So, yeah, been a bit crazy these last 4 years trying to dive into that world. And when I made this deal, I was like, okay, I'm going to perfectly craft and hone and write this video and put it on YouTube, and it's going to reveal to the world who would be the best cabinet members to pick. And 4 years later, within that first initial drive of learning more and more about politics, and a year later after making that agreement with my boss, I've evolved. There's something much more important that we all should be doing. More important than watching YouTube videos all day. More important than sending the most perfect tweet and receiving all the retweets all day and the dopamine being fired off in my mind. Instead, there's something way more important, and that's knowing the first name of my neighbors. I went and knocked on 20 doors, all the houses along my block that are connected to our back alley. I explained who I was, what I was doing, where I live. And I was able to speak to over half the people so far. I have not seen that many human beings light up in one day. First answering the door, they're cautious. I'm wearing my mask. I'm keeping my distance. But I explain, hey, I'm your neighbor. I live behind you, or I live 2 doors down. We need to come up with a better plan to secure our alley behind us. I'm gathering everybody's contact information. Oh, and by the way, I'm clearing out all the junk in the alley absolutely free. I rented the U-Haul, cleared all of it out, had a full van load. And then I even had people hitting me up afterwards, be like, oh, hey, I have this stuff. Can you come grab it? I'm like, I'm sorry. I was working at 7:30 in the morning. But the next time I rent a U-Haul and do a dump run, I'll do it. I haven't seen so many people be enthusiastic about what we're trying to do. I mean, at least the change from me knocking on the door, them being tepid. I knocked on so many doors back in my Mormon days. I hate it. I told myself I wouldn't knock on another door ever again until I actually cared about my neighbors. So I realized that I can have more of an impact, more of a substantial impact and have more fullness in my emotional being as a human if I cared about my neighbors than caring about what people say about me or about the people that I like or endorse on Twitter. So it was a success. Dump run was great. Allie looks great behind us. I'm going to knock on some more doors tomorrow, letting people kind of chill and relax on a Monday after the 4th of July holiday, and then leave some pamphlets on the door. I believe the plan that we're going to do is put up chains on either side of the entry to the alley and use a padlock with the same code. And then everybody on the block gets the code. So if they need to use it, they can use it anytime they want. Now, we could have issues with people not locking up behind them or padlocks being taken, possibly. But myself, my neighbor next to me, we're down to fund this stuff ourselves. I'd much rather have a system in place that keeps everybody secure than only worry about my own property. So I invite you, to those listening to this, if you don't know even the first name of your neighbors, even if you're in an apartment building, at least on the same floor, make an effort to talk to them and see if they need something. Wear your mask, wear gloves, but watch human beings light up. Watch human beings have a sense of place and belonging. We're living the consequences of the Industrial Revolution. This is something that I learned in, I think it was like high school, maybe college. But ever since the Industrial Revolution, families have been scattered apart. Sons would go off to the big city or somewhere else to bring in more money than ever before, leaving the farm. More and more people would flock to the cities for more jobs. And as the family became more and more spread out, these individuals would make friends and make their own lives and eventually, possibly, fall in love, get married, and have families of their own, feel belonging to somebody else. But the consequences of the Industrial Revolution is that if you have so many people scattered and living on their own islands, if you will, and only talking to people that go to their same church or go to the same job they work at, or only within the vicinity during the day, well, most of the day they're not home. Most of the day they're working at a different location. And so when they come home, they don't know the people around them. They don't know their neighbors who are doing the exact same thing, living their own life, working their own job, having their own family, friends, activities. A neighborhood doesn't feel like a neighborhood if the neighbors don't know each other. Growing up, we lived in a cul-de-sac. And I remember my family and my neighbors threw a block party for everybody. Still one of my most favorite days of all time. I remember, folks, I'm probably like 6, 7, 8 years old, but I remember the giant, Kool-Aid vat that you would have, those giant, almost like Gatorade containers. But I remember that. We had a yellow and red one, and that being on a table in the center of the cul-de-sac, and music and everybody having a good time. We don't have that. We didn't have that before the pandemic. We obviously can't do it during the pandemic. But I invite you to check in on your neighbors and see how they're doing. I mean, one of the things that would anger me the most is there are plenty of people around me that are older than me. And I talked about this in my last episode, where if I'm the new guy on the block, or if I moved in, or if you see somebody new, why haven't you come over and introduced yourselves? You've been at this. I have had one neighbor finally come over and talk to me, and he's lived in that house for like 50 years. So what happened? Why is it such a chore, a task to reach out to somebody that lives 100 feet away from you? And again, it's falling back into the consequences of the Industrial Revolution. We don't function as a tight-knit community / neighborhood / village anymore. We function as members of corporate entities. And the locations of the corporations is our family. I think that needs to seriously change. And I have to be the change, and I'm already working on it. But when I was going through this episode of my life of finally getting to know my neighbors, I was on Reddit, and I don't even know what the topic was, but somebody linked an interview to Christopher Reeve, the actor who played Superman and a number of other great roles, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but I would like to read this quote in response to a question from the interviewer. The interviewer asks, philosophically, what does Superman represent to people? And Christopher Reeve said, a friend. And that's what people really need most. They don't need a strong-arm, one-man vigilante force. They need a friend. We're living in an age when people are basically afraid of contact with each other. They are afraid. People live in cities. They don't know their neighbors. They're afraid to go out in the streets. Something might happen to them. Basically, technology is against you. Life is overwhelming. Even the bank doesn't know who you are. It's like we run around scared a lot, particularly those that live in cities. America was founded on the virtues of a helping hand, of going 5 miles to lend your neighbor a donkey, or whatever the need. It's that kind of virtue that is at the bottom, at the heart of Superman. The genuine love of people, and that you always know he's your friend. It was like Christopher Reeve was talking straight to me through the television. Time travel. It's like somewhere in time, except it was his words coming to me rather than his love going to Jane Seymour. I need to watch that movie. I hear it's amazing. You know, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in a higher power that's orchestrating everything, but there is something to this universe. Miracle life possibly creates some sort of field of consciousness we're tapped into. I don't know, something like that. Because these types of things, a message of reinforcement, words so perfect, it even causes me to be still right now when I think about it. So I thank the universe for that message. To hear the words of a man who's a statue in my mind, and that's Christopher Reeve, as an actor, an artist, and as the embodiment of Superman. So after having this moment with the Superman I grew up with, I wanted to go back and watch Man of Steel. And in yesterday's episode of the j.gray Report, I mentioned how I have my qualms with how Jonathan Kent was portrayed in Man of Steel. Man of Steel came out 7 years ago. I was still in my 20s. And actually, Man of Steel was the first movie I ever held hands with a girl in a movie theater. I was so excited for a lot of reasons. To see Superman on the screen and to finally share a fun romantic date moment with somebody that I've been kind of waiting for this moment for so long. So yeah, it was an impactful time, and a lot of those memories kept flooding back when I was thinking about the film, but I just remembered I didn't like Jonathan Kent being we have to wait, the world can't know who you are. And I was used to watching Smallville, where, you know, Clark Kent's trying to hide his powers, but he's saving people every week. But now that I'm older, I understand what David S. Goyer, the screenwriter, was going for, what Christopher Nolan, the producer, was going for, and what Zack Snyder, the director, was going for. In 2013, post 9/11 world, it had been 12 years since the attack. We're still fighting wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and all these other countries, Africa, all the shadow wars going on in Africa. So the American way was no longer the way of Superman. And that was detailed in comic books a number of years ago, where Superman's like, I can't keep saying the American way if America keeps screwing up like this. So the world that Jonathan Kent was trying to protect his son Clark Kent from in Man of Steel was that harsh, cruel, the world is going to take you away. They're not going to understand you. They can't handle what they don't understand. And Jonathan was protecting his son so his son can grow up to be a man with the shoulders to bear that burden. And then maybe Clark hadn't figured out his super fast speed yet. He was super strong. He could have walked up there and grabbed his father, but all those people would have saw him. And you're like, yeah, but then he has to live with the psychosis of losing his father. But then you think of Jonathan Kent going, yes, but the psychosis of the world taking him away before he's ready, or the world putting on the pressure and the burden of you are an alien, you are the answer to the question of are we alone in the universe? And for the intimate knowledge of Jonathan Kent to protect his son that way. Yeah, it's such a cynical approach compared to what I would prefer when I was younger. Now, and this is all happening when Superman's 33. 33 is the most important year for any man for a variety of reasons. But it just the symbology of this was fascinating. And I don't mean just with the Savior Jesus Christ symbology. I mean more of like the destiny of a man, what it means to be in your early 30s compared to your 20s. Where you're fully formed. It's time for you to be an adult. And Superman reveals himself in Man of Steel at the age of 33. I get it now because I have seen more of the depravity of humans. I've seen the betrayal. I've seen the focus on money first and the cranking out of people and how much time and love and devotion they put to their job or to their passion, and how an evil actor can destroy that. So that world that Jonathan Kent was more familiar with than I was, at least as a character in that script, that's what he was protecting Clark from. And that line that Henry Cavill, that Superman says, I trusted my father. I believed him. He said, the world wasn't ready. And I would reveal myself when the world is ready. It's just a very deeper concept that just flew over my head, or was just like, this isn't my Superman. But now that we see the bigger vision, the larger vision, this world is already on the brink. The military automatically is going to treat him like an enemy. Clark had to find a reason to believe in people, and he did through Lois. And so many of us have to go through that journey. Many of us have been burned by others. All of us have been disappointed. But we have to choose to believe in our neighbors. That's the spark. That's the thought that gets the action going. The genuine love of people, and that you always know Superman is a friend. That's probably some of the best motivation I've ever had. And as I was knocking on those doors, part of that PTSD flooded back of knocking on doors in Compton, Watson, South Central. And I was all alone. I'm a strapping young man, 6'2", 215 pounds. I work out every day. But anything could happen on the other side of that door. But I kept thinking, if Superman was here, what would he do? Would Superman put together a video to impress all his 10,000 Twitter followers about who should be in Joe Biden's cabinet? Or will Superman go make sure his neighbor needs any help? Making sure his neighbors are okay. Checking in at the local government to make sure everybody has a mask. Delivering food to people who need it the most. Helping a couple neighbors garden. Move some mulch. Find a cat stuck in a tree. Look for a lost dog. If they make a Man of Steel 2, I want the first 10 minutes of that movie to be Superman being classic Superman. All right, folks. I've been talking for 20 minutes. So other than that, I forget what week we're in, 16, 17, 18. I've lost count of the weeks. I'm just trying to make every week count, trying to make every day count. More work to be done on the house. I know I haven't been streaming video games because I'm working on the house and helping my neighbors, and that comes first. But there are some good games coming out. I think this summer, Ghost of Tsushima, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, is on the way. But thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your neighbors. And I'll see you online.